Okay, everyone, I think we're going to get started. I want to officially welcome you to the webinar today. We're so excited that you're here. My name is Judy Browse, and I'm the Executive Director of NAAA, and thrilled to be here and really excited to see all of you because it's really going to be a great discussion today. And it's all about connecting to place. And you're going to hear from our speaker about what that means as we look at regenerating nature, community, local economies through systems change. And we're really excited to have Matt Biggar here with us, who wrote the book, Connected to Place. And later on, we're going to be asking you a couple of trivia questions, and you'll get a chance to win a signed copy of the book. So we're very excited about that. And as I'm doing this little intro on how to use Zoom, please in the chat answer this question. The term systems gets used in a lot of different ways. How do you think about systems? How would you describe that? So in the chat, write that down, and Matt's going to get back to that when he comes on. So think about systems. How do you think about systems? And I want to thank all of you who have sent in questions. We'll get to as many as we can. And also, please feel free to add questions, comments, resources in the chat as we go along. That's always so helpful because everybody is thinking about things. And if you have a question, someone else is probably thinking about that as well. If you're new to NAAA's webinar series, we are bringing new ideas and insights into the field and beyond with really great speakers and people that are thinking about different aspects of the work we all do. And I also want to thank our wonderful affiliate network. We have 52 state, regional, provincial affiliates across the country. We all work together to try and strengthen environmental education and civic engagement and create a better world together using the power of education. So check out your affiliates. I also want to thank E360 Plus, which is supported by US EPA, for helping to support this webinar series. And again, please type your questions in the chat. We do have closed captioning, and for those of you who need the closed captioning, you have a choice of languages. And all of this is in the chat bar. You can see the chat and you can see the captions. And you actually have a choice of 31 different languages. So hopefully your language is there and you can see be able to see the captions that'll work for you. So I also want to thank Anne, who is helping to manage the webinar series with me. Anne is amazing. She's our Director of Leadership, Conservation, and International Programs. So Anne, thank you, and so glad you're here. Okay, a few trivia questions. Here's how it's going to work. I'm going to ask the question, and then later on, Matt's going to answer the question, and we will pick a random winner from everybody who gets the question right. Okay, so go ahead and start thinking. I'm going to turn over for the first question in the chat. How many times does the average American look at their phone each day? And for those of you in other countries, you could make a guess. I bet we look at our phones more than some others. Okay. Just looking to see what everybody is putting in the chat. Okay, next. How many vacant lots has Detroit transformed into urban farms and community gardens since 2010? And again, do not look on the internet to find the answer, just what you think. And we'll take a look at this later. Whoops. Okay, so now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Matt. And some of you might know Matt or have read his book or know of his work, but he is really an interesting thinker. He's a place-based strategy consultant. He does a lot of speaking, writing. He's a professor, lecturer, and a systems thinker. And we're going to talk more about that. And he's the author of the book. And before he became and started his own Connected to Place consulting group, he worked for 17 years in the public school system as a teacher, a principal, a district associate superintendent. And he got his Ph.D. from Stanford. And I know his colleague at Stanford said he was amazing. So, Matt, we are so thrilled that you could be here with us, and we look forward to hearing from you. And I'm going to stop sharing and turning it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Judy, for that kind introduction, and to Anne for helping set this up, and to NAAEE for your support of events like this. It's a great pleasure to connect with all of you in this space who are educators or really care about education, work on education in different ways. And coming from what I understand to be about 14 different countries and 41 different states, incredible from all these different places. We'll talk a little bit about the downsides of digital technology, but I think there are some upsides, and this is certainly one of them. And really grateful to NAAEE for having this kind of shared platform for shared learning across the globe. So what is in my throughout my career, and Judy mentioned some of it, as an educator, researcher, and now consultant, I've wrestled with this relationship between how we live and the bigger challenges that we face as a society. And so in Connected to Place, I try to bring those learnings together, and also demystify systems change at a time when there is a growing awareness of the need for it. Um, want to start with Indigenous wisdom, as I draw a lot on it. And I think as a society, I feel like we're opening up more to the wisdom that predates our this short time that we have now for millennia, and can help us move forward. So Robin Wall Kimmerer writes, "A place becomes home when it sustains you, when it feeds you in body as well as spirit." And this has become almost a foreign idea in today's society. There's so much that's pulling us away from this relationship to place. But I find this to be, a guiding light. This to me is an aspiration that I believe we can achieve. I believe it's, deep in our DNA and it calls us. But the journey getting there is not simple. And it starts with a somewhat clear-eyed view of the reality of today's world and where it's put us. And so I want to ask a few rhetorical questions to get us starting thinking about the current state of things. And so if I were to ask you, if you've spent about an hour in the car today, if you have bought online from a large corporate retailer, probably Amazon, maybe multiple times this week, if you have used a product or had some food today that came from outside of your state or province or outside of your country, and if you had looked at your phone for about 150 times today, for a total of more than 4.5 hours. If you were to answer yes to these questions, you would be the average American. And as Judy alluded to, maybe other countries don't have quite the same numbers, but these are global developments. And so I expect there are some similarities. Uh, we tend to overemphasize these as choices. And, really in this tiny blip of human history, all of these things have become such an increasingly part of our lives. And that has a whole lot more to do than just choice. These top-down economic forces of car dependency, digital society and all its different strands, consumerism, and economic globalization really profoundly changed the context for how we live. They've changed the water in which we swim, in which we find ourselves in everyday life. And now we have AI, perhaps more top down than any of these forces, and moving very fastly and very broadly into our lives. Um, what's so much drives this, and I think there's a lot to possibly understand here, but the one main thing is to think about the larger economic goal that drives most of this, and that is to increase quarterly profits. And the corporations that rely and kind of benefit from that, and that's, in the whole affiliates in the system, really rely on the continued expansion of this, because how else do you continue to grow, profits? So it's going to be increasing the amount of cars and the size of vehicles, the time in cars, keeping attention on our screens, selling more goods, more disposable goods, and then finding in the globe, around the globe, where can cheap nature and cheap labor be found to bring down cost and to increase profits. And again, I think we can objectively look at this. This is the logic of the system, and this is kind of where we find ourselves now. I know if you're on this call, you're probably, you're thinking, of course, there's been some benefits to all this access, this convenience, this access to information and products is pretty amazing, but there are also, been some drawbacks. And what I mostly focus on is how much these forces have kind of pushed us away from connection and losing connections in our lives. And these things have become well documented over the last couple of decades, and that includes a lot fewer nature experiences in everyday life. It includes less time in local community and within local businesses, for example, and also less interaction with people of different lived experience, from less time outside and more time in private spaces, but also just from increasing residential segregation that's definitely happening here in the States, and just getting around in separate ways. And then back to kind of the global part of it is the sources of our energy, food, and goods, often being so far removed from where a lot of people consume them. And I would say that it's not a coincidence, shall I say, that we have a poly crisis. And there's a lot of ways to think about these links, but what I want to offer is just how it comes back down to kind of our daily life experience and kind of living in these disconnected ways, right? In private spaces, private vehicles, and kind of relying on global transport and global products. There's a lot of, obviously, the emissions, and energy is increased at a much faster rate than population growth, with these changes. And so we have the connection with the climate crisis, right? We've got with local community, less time in local community, less opportunities there. It relates to the social isolation that we know has creeped up in our society quite a bit, and then that being online so much and these algorithmic fed that lead to social division, kind of is come to the social breakdown part that we're feeling a lot these days, and having trouble getting along with each other. And then the economic inequality piece, we can think a little bit more of like the hidden impact parts of it, where because of the separated communities so much, and it becomes kind of easy for folks who have resources to kind of ignore the plight of those who are struggling with financial security, and widening the gulf between wealthy and the poor. And then, except for frontline communities, the harm to nature that is happening with all of our resource extraction is not visible. It's hidden, and that, of course, is a big part of what's happening with biodiversity loss. And altogether, the unhappiness epidemic, which is seen in rising rates of depression and anxiety and stress, relates to these connections, and we'll be talking about that a little bit more. But so when I think about this, it is that we have a bit more than just losing connection. We have this underlying crisis of disconnectedness. And technology and federal policy and international agreements, they're not doing a great job right now, but they can address some of these big problems, some of the poly crisis problems. But that's not going to get to this underlying crisis as much. And so the hard truth of it is that we really have to face changing how we live, to get at this crisis of disconnectedness. And that is, of course, something that we shy away from. It's kind of maybe the current inconvenient truth of the poly crisis. But the hope here is that, I know it's a very dismal picture, and maybe, I'm not going to have very many slides like that. So if that kind of depressed you, don't worry. The point of that was that there is a path. And the path can be as simple as increasing the quality and quantity of connections in our lives. And when we get some guidance from thinkers like Buckminster Fuller, who says you never change things by fighting the existing reality, to change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. It helps us to feel a little less overwhelmed, perhaps, that we're taking on these top-down economic forces is very difficult. But trying in our own communities and cities and regions to start to build different models that can kind of steadily replace the influence of those top-down economic forces on society and on our lives becomes a path that we can pursue. And so that is the heart of my book. And the remaining of my talk is the why, what, and how systems changed. Because to build those new models, which are being built right now, there is reasons for hope, and I'll share some examples. To do that, we need systems change. And you were asked to think about systems earlier, and in a few slides, we'll get back to some of those thoughts. But to focus on the why part first, I think it's really important to get clarity around, well, what outcomes are we seeking? How are we trying to move in what kind of direction are we trying to move? And it could, I'm going to suggest, in fact, that it could be as simple as focusing on reorienting our lives around the places where we live. It's complex. That we know the challenge that right now there's a big gulf that we're not necessarily very oriented around our places as a society. But that to me is a direction that can really fit well. And we're going to talk about education and its role in making that happen. What fundamentally we're doing is reducing separation, right? Bringing energy closer to home or even on homes, mixing with people of different lived experience and how you get around in daily life, building community and restoring nature in your local neighborhood, getting connected to the people and the land that grow your food. All of these things and many more create a situation where we can depend more on our places. They can become our home again and extract less from someone else's place. This leads us to conserving more. We're faced with the realities of the limits to our resources. We're faced with the impact of our choices more directly and the motivation and all that technology and innovation that we have and that spirit can be directed towards conservation and meet those goals. And that includes also emitting less across all realms of life becomes much more possible in a place-based scenario. Repairing that social fabric, getting out in community and just one person at a time, helping to break down that isolation and division. And then narrowing inequality on a lot of different fronts, but one part of it is just increased opportunities to own local businesses, to invest in local businesses, to have local jobs, and share prosperity in those ways. But all of those goals are not going to be near enough to really move the needle. And that's just our fundamental human nature, right? We're self-interested, and that's different than selfish, but there is a self-interest. We care about taking care of ourselves, taking care of our families, and sometimes those can feel at odds with these other goals. And so the challenge then becomes like how do we think about how our lives can be fulfilled and with self-interest while also meeting those bigger goals. And that is, about living connected to place. And I have profiles on my website, all of these people and many more who are living connected to place in different ways. And so, starting in the upper corner, we have Wanda, who is cultivating community in school gardens. We have Hannah, who is frequently local businesses and local parks. We have Anthony, who's made a career out of place-based work. Lucian, who's recreating frequently in human-powered ways and knows the San Francisco Bay inside and out. Rebecca, who's backpack shopping to local farmers market and local groceries. And TR and Shalita, who are living car-free for a couple decades now. And so what I see when I look at these stories and I try to distill from their lives, but also the very large body of research on human well-being, a lot of relationship, right? And no surprise, it has a lot to do with connections. And so when I mentioned the unhappiness epidemic, the more we can create those stronger social connections, those connections to your community, having that sense of community as a place that you belong to, and knowing, all the restorative benefits of nature that many of you are so well versed in, making those more present in our life can be part of this. And then that feeds pretty well into physical, emotional, and cognitive health. But you think of the time outside, the more physical activity being so important. But it's not all social either. I do want to stress we do have needs for solitude and quiet time, and that decompression can happen in recreation. It can happen biking to work if that's your thing. There's a lot of ways that can fill into this. But really importantly, as a basis, none of these things are very possible if you don't have financial security in your lives, and so. How can these ways of living be more affordable? And there's a lot of ways, right? If you as a family can own one less car, or maybe you don't even have to own cars, the cost of car ownership goes away. If we're providing more housing for people where they live, like Anthony, who lives in a community land trust in San Francisco, which is a much more affordable way to live here with his family, then we're allowing for people to have more financial security living connected to place. And finally, there's the purpose element, right? It's not necessarily the drive that starts this, but the knowing that in your daily life you are doing positive things for your community and environment can really help kind of reinforce this. So, with all this in mind, Professor DeYoung, who had a lot of influence on me from Michigan in my own research, when he reflects on localized living, like I'm describing, he says that it's fortunate that the lifestyle we must somehow forge for ourselves may be enjoyable to live in. So we're getting out of this paradigm of sacrifice, which so often comes up with behavior change, and thinking about where can our self-interest merge with community and environmental well-being. And so you'd think, okay, we're on the right path. And then the common response to when we talk about changing behavior in almost any way, it doesn't work for me, right? That is going to be what we're mostly going to hear. And so that leads into the what if systems change, right? It is actually about changing the context for how we live. And so all of the people I just talked about, they are able to live connected to place in different ways because there are supportive systems in their communities, in their cities, and so forth that make it a little easier to do those things. And without that, it's going to be very hard to make any changes. Um, and so you were asked to think about systems a little bit earlier. And before I start to talk more about it, I don't know if Judy or Ann want to weigh in with some of the things you saw in that chat.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll just jump in with a couple, and they range from the complex to the simple. Lots of folks talked about connected parts that make the whole more and that are different than the total value of each part. And then Stacy said that she thinks of systems as a set of interconnected elements and processes that produce outcomes that are different from what might be expected if considering each element individually, along the lines of emergent phenomena. And then one of my favorite definitions comes from Rebecca. Rebecca said that she thinks of systems as interconnectedness, the dynamic calculus of things that interact, but also operate independently at different rates and frequencies, like gears in a machine. Did you see other definitions, Judy?
Well, I would just say those were great. And Anna had something about like systems as processes, Matt, but also infrastructure that supports the processes. And a lot of people talked about like systems are interconnected, and it's individual parts or players working in tandem, as Megan said. So a lot of really good thoughts about systems thinking, and how all the parts work together to create something different.
Great. Thank you, Judy and Ann. And interconnected seemed to be a very important word there. And it sounds like we have some folks who've read Thinking in Systems or related work. And Donnell Meadows was a renowned thinker, really got a lot of this underway during her life. And she talks about this set of things interconnected in such a way, the different parts. And it was interesting to hear like infrastructure that someone brought up, and the movements as a gear help is a nice metaphor. But the key thing here is, producing their own behavior over time. And so what I've found with systems change and systems thinking is it can really help lead us into thinking in ways that match the reality out there a lot more and avoid simple solutions. And that's very valuable in itself. But still, when I work a lot with place-based collaboratives at different levels of place, and it gets really hard to actually turn that into something, turn that into some sort of action. And so that's where I go, I start with this definition, but then we start to add layers to it, including like the behavior that we're thinking about, first of all, is human behavior. And so in a picture like this, I see systems, I see a lot of interconnected parts, I see multiple systems, which we'll talk about in a minute, and I see people behaving in certain ways. And so I encourage you to think about it as such. And then this is the part that I move into, particularly again with working with on the ground initiatives, is let's be really clear about what the systems are and make them as tangible as we can. And in the case of if the premise is about changing how we live, then what are those systems that really collectively do that? And these are the 8 that I highlight in Connected to Place and in my work around if you put them all together, and I've alluded to these a lot, it can really explain our daily life in a lot of different ways. But what I want to stress right now is how the current top-down economic forces that most of these systems are leading us towards separation right now because of that force. And so when we have housing and work and shopping fairly dispersed and fairly spread out from each other, we break down the connection. And then community spaces and nature spaces often being limited in quantity and quality for many places. And when you all that together puts pressure, we have to have a lot of transportation in our lives to get places, and that's often going to require a car. And then at the global level, we've got the food, energy, and consumer goods, and I already kind of highlighted how that creates that separation. So if this is like the current setup of these systems, then we want to understand, well, how did this come to be if we're going to try to change these systems? And so these are kind of the big ideas that lead us into a model for the what of systems change. And I'm going to take car dependency as just one of the top-down economic forces to give you an example of what I call the playbook. How has this happened over time? And so, no surprise, it is definitely has so much to do with like political and economic power. For over a century, big auto and big oil have had that kind of power. And now big tech with autonomous vehicles and rideshare platforms has added further power to the force of car dependency. And it's market power, but it's also, of course, political power and getting favorable taxes and all sorts of things that help to perpetuate the strength of car dependency. And then that translates so much into what we know as land use in most of our communities being built around the car. The transportation infrastructure itself and interchanges that literally look like this in some communities. But also, just the whole land use being requiring cars. And the cultural piece, right, is reinforced in so many different ways, but we do see frequent advertisements around cars and the association with the good life again and again and again. And it becomes part of the way we think. And the final part of what I'd say is like the playbook is how solutions are treated. So we know we need to change transportation. We need to make solutions with some of our big problems like climate change. But a lot of it stays kind of stuck with the resources and time being devoted to like different types of cars and not putting near as much into different modes of transportation or looking at the relationship of it with housing. And so when all this kind of comes together, we can now think about systems change. And so it starts with like these big ideas of just let's flip the playbook. How can we shift political and economic power to local and regional entities? Transform land use to enable living connected to place. Reset culture to change views and attitudes about what's normal and what's desired in our society. and leverage multiple systems to break down those silos and create more holistic change. And then together, we're changing the context for how we live. And the key thing though here is, all right, these are still big ideas. So how does this translate into action? I'm gonna give you some examples. So you were actually prompted earlier about one of the elements of this, and this is Detroit, the food system in Detroit, which has transformed 1,500 vacant lots into urban farms and gardens since 2010. And that has been helped with by nonprofits such as Keep Growing Detroit that are really helping to reset culture through farming training. They have an urban teaching facility, urban farm teaching facility. They provide resources, technical support, and really helping people, residents of the city, to see themselves as urban farmers. And then there's also a partnership that includes them and other groups in the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund. And that is helping to shift power in very measurable ways, where they've helped over 100 residents actually own the land upon which they farm in the city. And so together we got this increased connection to nature and communities through this urban agriculture and to the sources of people's food. And this aspiration that they share among these groups is to make Detroit a food sovereign city in which the majority of fruits and vegetables consumed in Detroit are produced in Detroit. When we go to Oklahoma City, we can look at a community spaces renaissance that has happened over the last couple of decades. Now, Oklahoma City in the 90s was really struggling economically. The downtown was very dormant. And so citizens started to speak up about changes. And eventually, some of the leaders in the community got together and put together a ballot measure for a 1 cent sales tax that would go into revitalizing downtown and really enhancing the quality of life around the city. And this measure has now passed 4 times and has led to dramatic changes across the city with public space and public facilities. That includes what you see here with this park, which used to be an interstate and vacant lots and buildings that were somewhat unused, scrap yards, and now has become a 70-acre park that connects downtown to the river. And it just brings people out a lot. And there is some housing that's being developed around it. But it's also activated to add to furthering people's desire to get outside and to connect. Is like activating the space through night markets and farmers markets and other aspects. And then we can look at energy as another system and think about connection there and how the systems change levers can apply. And so here in California, where I am, there has been a significant move towards community choice aggregation, CCA, where over 200 cities, towns, and counties in California have adopted CCA that enables local government and local nonprofit entities to aggregate electricity demand in their jurisdictions and to purchase electricity on the behalf of their residents and their businesses. And unlike investor-owned utilities, which they're generally replacing in that regard, they are responsible to the community, not to shareholders. So we're fundamentally changing that dynamic. And then some of them are getting into bringing that energy closer to home with regional energy development. And in fact, my own the Clean Power SF that I use here as a resident of San Francisco started this project here is actually the old wind farm, and they have replaced it, and it's going online this year with advanced wind power and advanced battery storage. It's going to be enough to power 120,000 homes in San Francisco, and it's located kind of at the very edge of the region, but it is less than 120 miles away, and so very different than some of the other power sources. So we've got bringing energy closer to people, to where more community control, to more development near where people live. And then the final example I want to share is with transportation, and probably the most dramatic change, less than a decade. Paris has gone to such an extent that they have 3 times more biking trips than driving trips inside the city center. And the systems change levers are kind of all coming to play here, where advocates from different areas and residents kind of came together and they found a mayoral candidate, Anne Hidalgo, and were part of helping bring her to power. And she even got reelected with this mandate to like really change and make Paris more livable and bikeable and so forth. And that's led to over 800 miles of new bike lanes, 100 open streets, which are closed to cars and but open to everything else. And that had to replace, in that regard, 50,000 parking spots and many car lanes. So it was pretty dramatic change as far as land use. Resetting culture in many different ways, but including how bike share stations and bike parking were just spread all over the city. So as a resident or as a visitor, you get this clear message that biking is valued here. But it's also a recognition that multiple systems, it's really hard to get around without a car unless shopping is nearby. And Paris had a foundation there, but they really made an effort to continue building in the kind of shopping that people need close to their homes, more growing of local food. As another change that's happened, and just a lot more nature, like a massive tree planting campaign, making a third of new streets plantings, just making it more pleasant to come outside. And so you'd think this would be enough change, but then last year, Parisians voted to open up about 500 more streets to walking, biking, and greenery, and close them to cars, removing 10% of the remaining parking spots and more car lanes. So when we think about these kind of changes, what's happening here is the building blocks for place-based systems, moving away from the systems I described earlier that are more shaped by top-down economic forces, and to the ones that are coming a little bit more from the community and local entities. And so we have, housing becoming more mixed income communities, so more people can live closer to where they work. And that would be, the work and shopping piece getting more centered in local business, and then transportation having active community-oriented modes, more like real choices for people as opposed to something that is really, perhaps dangerous to do. And then we add to that more community spaces and higher quality and nature spaces as well. And we've got the foundation for mixed use neighborhoods. And so when place-based systems converge, and the more abundant these five place-based systems are, and the more proximate they are to one another, the more potential for living connected to place. And then, of course, we've got the food, energy, and consumer goods part, where we can follow nature's lead. And so nature's lead with watersheds can lead us to think about having food sheds and energy sheds and making sheds and fiber sheds that provide more of what we need in our regions and lead to kind of self-reliant regions. It may not cover everything like banana and coffees, but we sure can do a lot more in our areas that bring back those connections in our lives and help really boost those local economies. And when we hear these ideas, and like the pushback can be very strong, like this is no longer possible. It's a global economy. This is how, things are. But there's research that can help us provide a different argument. And this is one I like to use a lot, which is from Cornell and Tufts researchers in 2020, who studied the agricultural land across 378 metropolitan districts in the country, and found that over half of them have enough existing agricultural land within a 155-mile radius to produce all the food that is consumed in those regions, with a baseline diet that it wasn't super meat intensive, but it still had some meat in it. And those are all the areas that are in green. And even the ones in orange and red, like New England that I've circled up above, can move in that direction. And so there's actually a partnership called Food Solutions New England that's doing a lot of great work and their goal is to increase the amount of food produced and consumed in New England from 10% to 35% over 15 years. So again, these things, there is possibilities here, and that gets us to the final part, which is the how of systems change. Because these ideas, we've got the levers and we can break down the levers into strategies, but like, how does it really happen? How do we really pull these systems change levers of power, land use, culture, and multiple systems, and breaking down those silos. And the way I think about this is through systems change catalyst. And many of you, maybe by nature of your work being involved in education, you may have not thought of yourself as a catalyst. And I hope that at least one takeaway will be to think of yourself in these ways. But one of them is definitely strategic collaboration, working across organizations and building power, systems-oriented government, restructuring government in ways, in many different ways, and then place-based education, playing a super important role that we'll break down in just a little bit more here. And then finally, personal change, right? And that would be how individuals can kind of row in the same direction as systems change and be a part of the systems change. So the four of these together, this is where the hard work lies. There's no silver bullet, as you know. There's no simple fix. But I feel if we can really focus on how well we can collaborate, how we can better govern, how we can educate in real targeted and helpful ways, and how we can act as individuals rooted in place. And the more these four catalysts are working in the same direction, they're aligned, now the possibilities for systems change can really emerge. And so let's talk about, we're not going to talk about all of them, and I'm keeping cognizant of the time here, but I do want to just spend a few minutes on place-based education, and then we're going to ask for some of your ideas because there's a tremendous amount of expertise on this call in education for sure. So thinking of place-based education as a catalyst, we know it, and I know as a former educator what an incredible way it is to engage students and to get students excited about learning, whether we call it place-based or environmental education. And that, as thinking of it as a catalyst, we do kind of first focus on how this can really be firsthand learning about systems in communities, cities, and regions. So it might be, let's take food, for example. It might be working in some regards on a school garden that's growing some food, but it's also an opportunity to think about the larger food system and to bring that into play. And then also just almost just talking about a lot of these projects that happen in place-based education, as when you're doing that, you're actually building place-based systems. If you're out restoring nature, you're building better nature spaces as one of the systems. And then finally, it is that long-term impact, I should say, about developing skills, knowledge, and competencies for systems change, and how we are equipping students, not just for future careers and work. And I'm also thinking of higher education, and I'm also adults. This can cover everybody, how we can bring these into our lives, into the workplace, and really become people who think and work on systems change and keep it front of mind. And so I think this is how place-based education becomes such a catalyst. I just want to quickly and kind of think about the many different ways that place-based education can also be place-based systems education across those systems that I've highlighted. And so, of course, the nature-based piece, and here's an example, restoring Strawberry Creek on the UC Berkeley campus. So an example of higher education. This is a student-led project. Students who are studying sea level rise in their communities, of community-based education and developing ways for their community to respond. The growing of food, as I've already highlighted, whether it's in the backyard or a school or in the community. And then, energy-based projects, right? With, in this case, developing wave energy generation in the nearby bay. Transportation-based education, safe routes to school being a good example, and housing-based education like Habitat for Humanity that offers programs for youth. So we're kind of pushing the envelope of what we might consider place-based and environmental education from this perspective, even into like local businesses, and how can students be involved in understanding what local businesses are about and the challenges and the rewards of it. And then the consumer goods piece, right? Can we provide education that helps students think about consumer goods and perhaps repair, and have repair cafes as part of our educational process? And all of these things together can really provide opportunities for students to advocate for systems change in their communities and to speak up and to get even to perhaps a city hall hearing as I know some of your students probably have done. So with that in mind, and I'm going to keep cognizant of time here, but I think we're going to pause. You've heard quite a bit, and we'd love for you to share in the chat examples of what I've kind of the place-based or environmental education programs that you think could serve as catalysts for systems change, kind of the way we're talking about it. And I just listed out again the systems that really shape how we live that I've highlighted for you. So let's take a moment there, and then we'll start to move towards some questions.
And Matt, we do have a number of questions for at the end after you get through listening to what they're putting in the chat right now. Some really good questions, really good discussion in the chat.
Great. Thank you, Judy. Yeah. So I think as you put, and I think in the chat, if you put some of your ideas, I'll just take a couple minutes to wrap this up, and then we'll get to questions. So I mentioned personal change as one of the catalysts, rowing in the same direction. And very quickly, that's one thing for us to all think about is place-based identity, and to help our students in education think about that. And there's so much that forces us into political identities these days, Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative. And really, can we pivot that to thinking of ourselves more as persons of a neighborhood, of a city, of a region, and in that way build bridges that we know we need to build. And just being a light for others and how you live, again, that's where it's possible. Do you have supportive context for these things? And can you kind of help be that light for others? And where that's not possible, how can you become involved in building place-based systems? I'm happy to talk about that more. So what we're doing is kind of helping be a change agent for the water that we swim in our lives. And I'd be creating this virtuous cycle as place-based systems grow and we grow, personal change happens, we help ourselves and others kind of wean off of that dopamine inducing technology and consumerism that's at play, and replace it with some other neurotransmitters and hormones that also make us feel good, like oxytocin that we get from social interaction, and helping move from being spectators to more participants in what's happening, and really trying to overcome those feelings of powerlessness that are so pervasive in our society right now, and moving towards regeneration with that idea that we take care of what we love and love only what we know. And so the more we know our communities, we know nature, we know our local businesses, the more we can love and take care of them, and move in that direction. And so I finish with kind of echoing words of indigenous people from the millennia, that our place reminds us of who we are, a part of nature and community, and understanding that oneness with nature and community can really happen in our places, and help us not only regenerate nature and community and help heal it there, but also heal ourselves in the process. And so that cycle of, with systems are kind of breaking down in different ways now. So can we point them towards regeneration and well-being, pull those catalysts, use the catalyst to pull those levers, and to build those place-based systems that help more of us live connected to place, and move things towards regeneration and towards more happiness, meaning, and hope in our lives in these days. Thank you.
Matt, thank you so much. So much great information. And thanks to everybody in the chat for all the ideas that are coming through. Just the last question you asked, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the chat, but everybody was mentioning things like citizen science, MeWes, exploring watershed, meaningful watershed experiences, Earth Force, cultural tourism, green schools, growing orchids, after school nature walk, just a lot of ideas. So let me start, and then Anne, if you also want to jump in with questions. One of the questions was, then Meredith asked this about, you shared a number of urban examples. Any ideas for rural communities on thinking this through, even though they're a little more maybe connected to nature naturally, but not always. So what do you think?
Definitely, and I'll say like suburbs and rural areas. There are a lot of encouraging things. There is I'm going to forget where the town is, but it's called Morris, and it's a very small rural town, and it was devastated by uh, it was tornadoes, pretty much knocked most of the town out, and they decided to build back. They were going to build all basically wind energy, and they've done it, and that's happening there. And so and I hope that's not the path is like having to face such tragedy, but with climate change, we know these kind of things can be happening. But there's also like I read again and again of stories. Like I know the Congress for New Urbanism has really did put their conference this year in Northwest Arkansas and some more rural towns there that are really starting to rethink like how they revitalize their main streets, and make it so more people are coming out and being part of that. So it is with it's certainly about retrofitting things and rejiggering things in a community. And I think you start with the culture and the history of the place. And if it's an agricultural place, how can we shift it so more food is being grown for us here in our community as opposed to being exported, which is so common.
Thank you, Matt. And Lee had another question. You were talking about the improvements in all these areas. How do those tie in with affordability and living close to these and new improved systems? So that link.
Yeah, so important. And so that's why I do start with housing. And I think housing is the fundamental issue. Certainly face it in the Bay Area and many different places that is just simply unaffordable for a lot of people. And living connected to place is almost impossible for those who work in expensive cities but don't have this, our teachers and our police, fire, nurses, etc., whoever it might be. Of course, people working in retail and so forth. And so that has to be a real priority here. And so I detail a lot of different ways that that's happening. And housing's complex, but it seems like building more housing but also having government and nonprofits involved in subsidized housing is so important. But I think there's like a fundamental. I want to come back to like the fundamental idea too, right? That is, everyone should be able to live close to where they work. I mean,
Yeah.
that should be like our
Yeah.
fundamental goal. And then from there, we need to figure it out.
Thanks, Matt. Anne, do you want to take one?
Sure. There was some discussion in the chat earlier, Matt, when you were talking about the crisis of disconnectedness. And I think it was Catherine is talking about, is this more that you're seeing in developed countries that rely more on capital?
And Anne, you're breaking up a little
Is
bit.
this,
I'll
Right.
just, it's
is this,
it's more
is,
along. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
so,
You were freezing for a bit. Keep
oh,
going.
Yeah.
sorry. If this disconnection is mostly a uniquely American phenomenon, or are you seeing that also
Mhm.
in your research?
Yeah.
Storming here. Are you seeing it in your research in other countries?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, I have to say, and I don't have access to all the different places as much. I've definitely heard from people in different European countries that like we are wrestling with this too in a lot of different ways. And so I think it does kind of go back to those top-down economic forces of how much is car the dominant mode of transportation in your area, how much is screen time and digital life working digitally a part of it, and then like the consumerism and aspect of it as well. So I think in some ways, not all places, and places that are more on the developing side of things may actually, I can think of examples, have retained some of the living connected to place. And so there's actually a wealth there that we really need to honor and learn from, that we're losing more in perhaps countries that are more affluent, like ours.
Well, and Matt, I mean, this topic we could spend 8 million days with you. It's a huge topic, but in the chat, there's so many good examples. Like Meredith was talking about the Alliance for Chesapeake Bay offering technical assistance to towns and rural areas to implement green infrastructure. Just lots of examples of what's happening in your own communities. Um, Meredith had also had a question about as people are retreating from coastal communities because of all the flooding and whatever
Mhm.
is going on, how is that going to influence systems change as people have to move away from coasts? Any thoughts on that? Have you worked in communities that are dealing with that inward migration?
Definitely the threat of it, right? I mean, here in the Bay Area, none of the counties
Yep.
touch the water. And so there's a whole lot of work going on around sea level rise. And this comes to me, a lot of the angle around connection is how are we using nature to help address sea level rise? And there are a lot of great things underway and people thinking about nature-based solutions and how can we build back our wetlands and other protections that will help mitigate some of the damage from climate change. And I also think, part of this change in living is to try to also, bring down our emissions. And so the climate crisis is here, but it doesn't continue to get worse because at some point, it can become so bad that we really just can't save these places at all. And I know places like Miami are already dealing with much more regular flooding, and
Yep.
so there's a hard reality about that. But I think nature is our guide. Nature is our
Yeah.
guide. How can nature help us?
Well, Matt, thank you again for everything. We have quite a few other thoughts and comments in the chat. Everyone will get a copy of the recording. Everyone will get a copy of the chat, so you'll be able to see the ideas that others have. And I know there were some specific examples in there, Matt, that you might have um, kind of uh, an answer that might be really helpful to somebody that's really struggling with some of this. So thank you so, so much. And we really appreciate this. And again, we will get back to you with who wins the book. And Matt, thank you so much for being part of this. We really appreciate it. And Anne, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out.
Awesome. Thank you, Judy. And thank you to Matt. As we close today, just want to share a couple of reminders and resources and opportunities from NAAEE. My first reminder for all of you, Judy just shared, and that is everybody will be getting the recording and the chat notes on our website. You'll also be getting that sent to your emails. There are so many ideas of place-based environmental ed programs and wonderful resources shared in the chat. So you will all get that the next couple of days. And as far as announcements go, one of our bigger ones is our annual conference. We're going to be in person this year in October in the beautiful city of Portland, Oregon. And registration is now open. And if you are interested in a scholarship and applying for one, those applications are due this week. So definitely check that out as soon as you hop off this webinar. And you can learn all about the speakers and presentations and workshops and all the special events if you just head over to our website. And then if you want to keep learning with us, we'll be back here on Tuesday, this time with our friends at Jeep Africa. We're going to be talking about the circular economy and all these really great bright spots that are happening across the continent. We've got 3 speakers lined up for you coming from Ghana and South Africa and Kenya, and it's going to be a wonderful conversation with this group. So join us if you can. And then lastly, last resource I want to share is the NAAEE podcast. If you haven't heard it yet, you want to check it out. It is called The World We Want, and we are deep into season 2 right now. And you're going to hear these wonderful conversations from authors and poets and educators and gardeners and just people from all over the world across the spectrum doing great work in EE. So check that out, and you can find our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And then lastly, we always want to hear from you. We want your ideas on speakers and topics, and also let us know what you thought of today's webinar. If you just head over to that QR code, you can share all your thoughts there. And I think that's it. Thank you, everybody. Thanks again, Judy. Thank you, Matt. And thanks all of you for spending the last hour with us. And we will see you again on another webinar very soon.